Good evening, Chair. You're now live on YouTube.
Thank you, Vic. Thanks a lot. Welcome to this virtual extraordinary meeting that is being conducted with members and officers of at various locations, communications via audio, video and online. There's also the opportunity for the public and press to listen and view these proceedings. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work and confirm how members and officers are in attendance. Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, can you please indicate your attendance to confirm that the required members and officers are present and can hear and be heard? Councillor Albert.
Yes.
Allen.
Present.
Aspinwall.
Yeah, I'm here.
Claire Billing. No. Judy Billing.
Yep.
Ruth Brown.
Present.
Bryant.
Present.
Clark.
Here.
Collins.
Yeah, hello.
Davidson. Haven't seen him yet. Davies.
Here.
Deacon Davies.
Yes, I'm here.
Dennis Harburg.
Here.
Derbyshire.
Present.
Green. Green. You're muted, Jean. Councillor Green.
I'm here.
Thank you. I don't think Councillor Grindle's here. Harwood.
Present.
Hone. Hoskins.
Yeah, present.
Hewson.
Yeah.
Hunter.
Present.
Jarvis.
Yes, I'm here.
Levitt. Right, Councillor Levitt.
Present.
Thank you. Mantle.
Yeah.
McNally.
Present.
Moody.
Present.
Morris.
Good evening.
Muir.
Present.
Nash.
Present.
Nguala.
Here.
North. Councillor North. We can't hear you. Not sure why, but we can't hear you and you're not muted, so. Okay, I can't hear you. Okay, I'm going to move on and see if Councillor North can sort himself out and come back to him. Councillor Oliver.
Here.
Prendergast.
I'm here.
Rice.
Present.
Rogerio Chaka.
Present.
Stanley.
Yeah.
Dania.
Present.
Steers Hanscom.
Present.
Strong.
Present.
Fake.
Here.
Tyler.
Here.
Tyson.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So I don't know if Councillor Claire Billing, I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
answer. Thank you. Who else did I see?
No.
Councillor
North.
Davidson. Are you here? I'm just checking the attendance list of the participants list.
Was
to
it
see if
Sam North that you missed, I think?
Yeah, that was another one that I've missed. Hang on.
I'm here, Hilary, if you can hear me now.
Thank you, I can hear you. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Shanley, I'm not sure if he's here either. Let me just double check. No. Okay, I think it's just Councillor Bill Davidson. I just need to double check if he's here or not. Just 1 second. No, not here. Okay, is there anybody that I've missed off for members? No. Okay, thank you. So officers, I have Anthony Roche.
Yep, I'm here.
Jeanette Thompson.
Present. Good evening.
Ian Fullstone.
Good evening, present.
Ian Cooper.
I'm here.
Nigel Smith.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you. Isabel Alajules.
Present.
Nuranetta Katavu.
Present.
I missed any officers? Oh, sorry, William Edwards.
Present.
Is there any officers that I've missed? And then we have guests. We have Suzanne Ormsby.
Good evening here.
And we were expecting one other and I haven't seen. Is there any other guest here? No.
It was also not myself, Hilary, Louise Symes.
Oh, thank you, Louise. Thank you. I do apologise. Okay. That's it, Chair. Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move. Hilary, are you going to cover the live streaming?
Yeah. Yes, I will.
Thank you.
So the meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel and also recorded via Zoom. If live streaming fails, the meeting will adjourn. If the live stream cannot be restored within a reasonable period, then the remaining business will be conducted at a later date. Please stay in view of the camera at all times. If for any reason the meeting is not quorate, an officer will notify attendees by interjecting the meeting. The meeting will adjourn immediately. Once the meeting is quorate, the meeting will resume. If connection cannot be restored within a reasonable period, then the remaining business will be considered at a later date. Only members present for the entire debate and consideration of an item are entitled to vote. If a remote member loses connection, the chair may adjourn the meeting for a short period to enable connection to be re-established. If the chair does not adjourn the meeting, the member will be deemed to have left the meeting at the point of failure and deemed to have returned at the point of re-establishment. Please ensure that your mobile phone and other devices are muted. Please activate the mute button on your tablet or your computer when you are not speaking, and please be mindful that others can see you. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the raise hand button. Please remember to unmute your microphone before speaking. If a member has a closure motion, personal explanation, or point of order, please interject the meeting and wait for the chair to invite you to speak. When satisfied that there has been sufficient debate, the chair will request that the committee member and scrutiny manager read out the recommendation that members will be voting upon. When requested to vote, voting will be via the green tick for yes, red cross for no, and blue hand for abstain. To enable the votes to be counted, please do not clear the vote until requested to do so. There are part 2 papers this evening. When councillors resolve to move into part 2, the host will ask members and relevant officers to join a breakout room, which you will need to accept. You will all automatically be transferred into the breakout room, which is where the part 2 discussions will be held. Once the part 2 discussions have concluded, members will need to move back into the public part of the meeting. Whilst the part 2 discussions are happening, the live stream of the meeting will not have ceased. It will have continued live on YouTube with a holding message. To leave the breakout room, you select the blue leave breakout room option on the right-hand corner of the screen. Please do not select leave meeting. The system will then automatically redirect you to the public part of the meeting. And please remember, you will automatically be muted. Please be aware that if you do not accept the invitation to go into part 2, into the breakout room, it is not possible to send you another invitation. You will have to leave the meeting completely and rejoin, at which time it may be possible to issue the part 2 invitation. My colleague will remain in part 1 for a few minutes to ensure that anyone in that situation is issued with a second invitation. Are there any questions? In that case, I'll hand over to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hilary. First of all, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors David Barnard, John Bishop, Faye Frost, Kate Hart and Michael Weeks. Is there anybody else that we need?
Gary Grindle sent his apologies.
Gary Grindle, thank you.
Councillor Bill Davidson, Chairman.
And Bill Davison.
May I just spare your indulgence for a moment on Councillor Barnard at this point, Chairman?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Chairman. For those members who, I think all members probably know, Councillor Barnard's wife, Sue, has been in intensive care in Turkey for several weeks now. I'm sad to say that yesterday evening at 4 p.m, Sue passed away. David was with her, and Faye Frost and Michael Wheats, a very good friend of David's, are with him in Turkey at the moment. And I'm sure those who know Sue from social occasions and that will know what a loss she will be to David and her family, and to many others who will miss her. And I'm sure you'll join me, please, in sending our sincere condolences to David. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. Yes, absolutely. Horrific news. Yes, condolences from the chair and from all of us, I'm sure. Yes. Right. Chairman's announcements. Audio recording in accordance with the council policy. This meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording is available via our mod.gov, and the film recording is via NHDC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded that to make declarations of interest before an item, the detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject at that point, just to remind members that I sent out dispensations via emails this evening, and although I don't think it's a specific interest, or there's none that's very evident to me, I have, in accordance with the normal practice, issued that, and it's for the purposes of this meeting, for any interest that you may have, be it property interest or membership or various bodies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeanette. Right. Rules of debate. Please be reminded that the normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. One of the things I've been requested by several members is that I tighten up on the 5-minute rule. So I've got a watch here, and I'll be measuring speeches and to try and to curtail it after 5 minutes. Okay, just to let you know. No speeches no speeches may be made after the mover has moved a proposal and explained the purpose of it until the motion has been seconded. When seconding a motion or amendment, a member may reserve their right to speech to a later date, later time in the debate. In accordance with the Constitution, a member may reserve their right to speak later on in debate. Sorry, I just did that. So in accordance with the Constitution, can members ensure that no speeches exceed 5 minutes, which I've sort of rather underlined this time, without the consent of the chair. There will be a comfort break and I'm pretty sure this is going to be a heavily debated motion, and it will be around about 9 o'clock. Heaven forbid that we might need a second one, but we were provisioned for a second one if we need it. Order of business. Today discussion, I'm amending the order of business as follows. I will be dealing with items 3 and 4 together. I will ask for the motion to be introduced, proposed and seconded. We will then consider the part 2 item. The part 1 report, motion and amendment will be considered and debated as one discussion. After we consider the part 2 item.
Chairman, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. It's Judy Billing here.
Councillor Billing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'm really not trying to be difficult, but I put up my hand earlier because I'd wanted to say something about David and Sue Barnard, and you didn't see me, and that's fine. So I went to the chat so that I could not interrupt the meeting, but say what I wanted to say there. And then I see that chat has been disabled. So I don't quite understand why chat is disabled. There must be some means of communicating.
Councillor Billing, I'm not sure myself, actually. Sorry, I can see the hands. I wasn't expecting any hands to go up, I suppose. But if you wish to say something, Councillor Billing, please do.
Well, it's past the moment, and it doesn't matter. I just wanted to say that I've been in touch with David and Faye today, and that that he was responding warmly and well, and I just thought he was doing really well. And I just wanted to say that. but that's not worth interrupting a meeting for. So if we could have the chat line undisabled, then things like that we could say there. As I say, I'm on this occasion not trying to be a nuisance.
Okay, Judy, that's fine. Vic, can you respond to that? Is the chat disabled? Yes.
Yeah, good evening, Chair. I've no idea why it's disabled. I didn't set this meeting up. It's now being organised by a new committee clerk, so I'll review their training and see why it's been disabled.
All right. Is there any way we can change that in this?
Chairman, Richard Thake, I think that the reason it has been disabled is because there was a concern amongst senior officers in previous meetings that these meetings should be conducted in public, and maybe the capacity to chat was not necessarily available to the wider public. That I suspect is what it is, and clearly it would be very nice if we could chat to each other, but I perhaps officers could enlighten me.
Thank you, Richard. Vic, is there anything you want to add to that? I saw that Councillor Billing was shaking her head, so I'm not sure if there's a total agreement here.
Nothing I can do midstream meeting, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Vic. In that case, yes, we'll examine that for the next meeting, and also the reasons behind it that Richard has alluded to.
Chairman, I've had a raised hand from the beginning of the meeting on apologies, so that I can apologise for Val Shanley.
Sorry, I can see your hand up, Councillor Muir. So Val Shand is not joining us.
Yeah, and can I also say I have an interest, a personal interest, as Baldock County Councillor, and seeing we're having 3,300 houses on county land, I've been discussing with officers how we can improve that.
Councillor Muir, sorry to interject.
I can't.
Councillor Muir.
Vote.
Councillor Muir.
Yes.
Jeanette, yes.
I did mention that I'd issued a dispensation in relation to that, but if you're excluding yourself at this point, then obviously it places you in a difficult position then, doesn't it? Because you won't be involved in the whole debate or discussion. But I can see no reason why, in theory, you wouldn't have been under the circumstances.
I'm afraid, I'm sorry to say, I haven't had your email. The tablet has gone wrong for emails. It went wrong yesterday.
Councillor Muir, Jeanette said it verbally that you have dispensation for this. So did you want to withdraw that?
I will still, I want to listen to the debate, but I will not vote.
Okay, your choice. Thank you, Councillor Muir. We're now moving on to the notice of motions. Can I now ask Councillor Sam Collins to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair, and just echoing everybody's kind comments about David Barnard, it's very sad news. But I'm fully aware that this meeting is inconvenient and perhaps slightly awkward for some of you, but I think it's perhaps one of the most important, if not the most important, of the council in my time as a councillor at least. And what we discuss here tonight and the decisions we're going to take tonight are going to be those that impact the area for not only up to 2031, but for generations to come. So we can't shy away from this because it may seem difficult or challenging. It's our responsibility as councillors to do tonight what is right for the future of our district, for our children and our grandchildren. The North Arts local plan was put together under a very different administration to the one that currently runs this council. And for the entire time I've been a councillor, since 2018, the local plan has been with the inspector. So we've not been able to do very much about it. But after receiving some external advice and after consultation with the officers here at the council, it became clear that we did not only have an opportunity to act, but we also had a responsibility to act. For a good number of us, this is the first opportunity that we've had to discuss the local plan at a full council meeting and make our positions clear on it, as we were not councillors at the time when the local plan was last discussed in this now virtual chamber. When the plan was drafted and presented to the council, a number of councillors raised very serious concerns with its size and its scope. It seemed a little bit more like a developer's wish list than a viable plan for the district. And there was little attention paid to the infrastructure like schools and doctors' surgeries and even transport requirements. No great care was given to the environment either. Air quality impacts were a major issue from the inevitable traffic congestion in Hitchin Town Centre, for example, in Highbury Ward, which I represent. Water shortages, we've heard about the problems with the River Ivell, and that some of the factors in the plan and some of the Greenbelt development could have really damaging effects and could essentially be a death sentence. There are our chalk streams that run right across the district, and they're protected, and we really, as a council, we've already resolved to try and protect them. That's not reflected in the plan. But this lack of environmental awareness should come as no great shock to you when you look at when you consider that the plan proposes to tear up much of the Greenbelt to destroy some absolutely wonderful countryside. And at the time, councillors from all three parties have expressed concerns about the plan. And the concerns they raised at the time have not really been addressed in the time. They've only become more urgent. And the plan has been forced through regardless. Because the plan was so vast in scale, it was ultimately recognised on two separate occasions in the household projections from the ONS that the numbers have been reduced. So the ONS has reduced the numbers. It doesn't think we're going to need as many houses in North Hertfordshire. That's the plan itself, though, hasn't really changed. Indeed, when the ONS first reduced its household projections for North Hertfordshire, the council didn't make its response to the inspector on that matter public. The inspector had to ask the council, in fact, tell the council to do so, which was a real shame. But fortunately, they did. Well, since then, the ONS numbers have been further reduced. And even now, the council has refused to even consider looking at reducing the number of sites in the plan. These projections were made before COVID-19. They were made before the negative impacts of Brexit were really fully understood. And neither of those are taken into account on top of that. Though notably, in the last period that we have accurate data for, in 2018, the net migration into the area was a negative. It's the first time since 2001 since that's happened. So the ONS predictions say that the demand for housing in North Hertfordshire is falling. And the council has at least accepted that in part, but not in full. The data on news housing shows that the demand is falling. We know it's going to be worse in 2020 when that data becomes available, and it's probably going to be a hell of a lot worse in 2021. But the plan still remains unchanged. To not reduce the number of sites when we know the number of houses in the plan is going to be lower than when it was first drafted is quite simply illogical. If the number and size of the sites in the original local plan, designed for at least 14,000 houses, was correctly calculated and it was sufficient for that demand with a buffer, then simple logic will dictate that the number and size of the sites in the plan that we now have must be excessive and should therefore be reduced. If the number and size of the sites is correct for the number that we're working to now, the reduced number from the ONS, well, then the methodology and methods used to draw up the original sites in the original plan must there be incorrect and flawed. But those are the same methods being used for the current plan. So there's a logic disconnect here.
You've had 5 minutes so far.
Okay, I will come to a quick end. Sorry, it's quite a detailed bit. With your indulgence, Chair, I'll carry on.
Okay.
So I must turn my attention to the report produced by the officers for this meeting, and I don't believe it tells the full story. So I need to draw your attention to a few elements in this, and thank you for your indulgence on this, Chair. At 8.1...
Chairman, point of order. If you're going to extend this courtesy to Sam Collins, and I've given the importance of the issue, perhaps I am not going to be bloody awkward about it. I hope you will extend the same courtesy to everybody else.
I will endeavour to do that, Richard. Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. I'll continue with your permission.
Chair.
Councillor Albert, point of order.
Yeah, point of order. Look, I'm really interested in hearing Sam and obviously his full speech. But look, you know, we either have a rule or we don't have a rule. And I have to say that you know, lots of people have prepared their speeches within the 5 minutes. So personally, I think that should end now. But I agree with Councillor Thake. If obviously, Chair, that Councillor Collins can have 5 minutes, then everyone should be able to have more than 5 minutes, and we should just scrap the rule. I just think it's one thing or another here, and I'm really sorry, Sam, because I'm really interested in hearing what you want to say, but it does need to be within the 5 minutes.
Chair, can I also remind that Chair, also can I remind no speeches until this has been seconded, and unless I've missed that, it hasn't been seconded.
It hasn't been seconded yet. No.
It hasn't yet been proposed, Chair, so I need to continue within
Yeah.
the rules.
So we seem to be having speeches before, though, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I understand the feelings, and this is important, of course. Councillor Collins, please proceed, and I will extend if I need to with other councillors.
Thank you, Chair.
Point of order, Chairman. Oh, sorry, further point of order, Chairman. As the legal officers pointed out, we do need to have the motion proposed before we can debate it. And this does sound rather like a speech before, rather than a straightforward proposal of the motion, which is before us. But however, my point of order, which I was going to raise when the motion was proposed, is that this motion shouldn't actually be here before council at all. It relates, and as Councillor Collins has already alluded to, the local plan. And the local plan is an item on the forward plan of this council, the last copy of which was published on the 16th of September before this motion was raised. Therefore, the notice of the meeting went out on the 25th of September. The motion proposed relates to a potential major modification already in inspector's list under ED 194, August 9, 2020. So I submit, Chairman, as a point of order, that this motion should not be heard as it does not fall within the constitution of this council. Chairman, it was done with your permission.
Thank you, Councillor. The motion has been reviewed, and I think it is something that's in the, we could do.
Chair, do you want me to give you some advice on that point?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. I think as Councillor Levitt is aware, the provision within the Constitution says that the proper officer may, with the consent of the Chair, refuse to accept a motion. So it is a discretionary matter. So even if the matter had been on the forward plan, the proper officer could only have refused it if the Chair consented to that and the Chair accepted the motion and therefore can proceed.
Thank you, Jeanette. Can I return to Councillor Collins? If you can actually move the motion, please.
Chairman, could I raise a point of order? Because we're going to the motion and you've rearranged the agenda to take the motion before we've actually had an opportunity to take advice. And this is advice, as I read in the report. And I have to say, it's the first time I think I've ever come to full council to debate a motion where there is a 78-page report and a part 2 item that addresses the motion that we were about to debate. So I'm a little unsure why you've changed the agenda and why I'm not having the possibility of going into debate the reasons why this is this is a slightly difficult motion for the council, and I do feel we ought to be looking at that advice before we get in and start debating the motion, particularly the part 2 advice that is given to us as councillors, which I believe we do have a duty to look and refer to and ask questions on.
I do understand, Councillor Strong. There was a lot of debate today about how to handle the various elements of this motions and the various parts of it, part 1, part 2, and with the consensus of myself and the officers, that it was decided this would be the best way for it to be conducted and the most quickest way as well.
So just for clarification for my own, therefore you are not interested in councillors taking advice in a part 2 item before we debate the motion?
Well, some advice.
Perhaps we can just go back to what you said before, which is that you were going to take these 2 items together, and once you have moved and seconded, or the motion has been moved and seconded, we would go to consider whether this would go into part 2. So you would then consider the report, go into part 2 and come back out again for any further public debate. So you will be considering the report, Councillor Strong, as will other members, prior to having the more public debate.
Well, just a point from me, I have never seen this done in this council, this way of conducting business, going into part 2 to consider a report in the middle of debating a motion.
Duly noted, Councillor Strong. Councillor Collins, could you move?
Thank you, Chair. I will be very, very brief. Just a couple of points, because I was specifically asked to address these by the officer. So I want to draw your attention to the report that is in front of you. There is a very clear reduction in the number of homes required in North Hertfordshire, but there is no case made not to reduce the number of sites in the plan. So at 8.15, the officers have shown their interpretation of this motion, but while the motion specifically relates to sites, the officers have focused purely on numbers. And then at 8.19, the report claims there's been no suggestion in any correspondence from the inspector that he's any way dissatisfied with the methodology used in the numbers setting the local plan. This doesn't seem quite correct, as the report continually references ED 191 A and B, and the council's reduced to the reduced figures. The report entirely omits to mention ED 194, which I'm pleased the colleague has raised, which is absolutely a crucial document. In ED 194, there's a list of questions from the inspector in response to ED 191, and in it he directly questions the council's calculations, asking if they're correct and accurate, whether the size of the buffer is questioned, and a number of other details of the plan and the methodology are questioned. So the assertion made at 8.9 rather is entirely misleading in my opinion, and I will come straight to the motion now.
Point of order, Chairman.
Well, if I could read the motion, Chair, we can get to the end.
This is debating the issues. It is not moving the motion, and I move that we move the motion.
Well, I was about to.
And I agree.
Yes.
Councillor Collins, can you move the motion, please?
The motion I'm moving, it says, the council notes that the projecting housing need for North Hertfordshire has reduced as a result of the latest predictions by the Office of National Statistics. The council believes that the proposed allocation of housing sites in the local plan should be reduced to reflect this reduction in projected need, and instructs officers to convey this to the inspector as soon as possible and carry out any review work requested by the inspector as a result.
Can I have a seconder, please?
I second the motion and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. As previously advised, we are now considered a part 2 item. Any debate?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I've got my hand up.
Councillor
Tyson.
Councillor Tyson, sorry, yes.
I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion, if I may. Namely, the addition of a single sentence at the end of the text of the motion.
On a point of order, Chair, I believe you had given us instructions in the meeting at this point, before there is any debate or any amendments, that you would be recommending we move to part 2. So yeah. I think you should stick to the agenda that by accepting your ruling at the beginning, we've accepted the agenda, Chair.
Precisely. Councillor Tyson may have an opportunity to come back to your proposal. I absolutely agree. Previously advised, we'll consider a move to part 2 item. Any debating this motion will take place and we'll return to part 1. Exclusion of the press and public. I'd like to move that under section 100.
Chair, before you do that, we need a seconder.
We have got it. Ruth seconded it.
My apologies.
Thank you. The press and public can be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following report will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 5 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act as amended. Can I have a seconder to move part 2? Councillor Val Bryant. Thank you, Councillor Val Bryant, to second it.
Chairman, I have my hand up. Richard Thake.
Sorry, Richard, what would you like to say?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have to say that whilst I do not wish to frustrate the proper business of this council, I find it fundamentally difficult, profoundly difficult, to understand and comprehend, and certainly to support, the concept of debating such an important issue in closet, so to speak.
We will be debating it in part 1 as well.
Well, I hear you, Chairman. I hear you, Chairman, but please allow me to make my point.
Sure.
This council, irrespective of the fact that it was an iteration before the present one, which Councillor Sam Collins has very clearly outlined, voted to put the plan into the public domain to be debated in public examination by an independent superior planning authority, the inspector. And we are now talking about carrying on clandestine negotiations and debate which will not be in the public domain. I find that very, very difficult. I will not vote against moving into part 2, Chairman, for the very specific reason that I am advised that this would put this council into a position where we might be called into special measures. Now, whilst, Chairman, I have very little confidence in the current administration, and whilst I think perhaps special measures might be a very interesting way of reining in some of the excesses that specifically the Liberal Democrat Party of this coalition is putting forward, that would totally disenfranchise the elected members of this authority from carrying out their proper function. So I will not vote against it, Chairman, but I will certainly abstain because I do not agree that we should be debating such an important issue in clandestinely.
Duly noted, Councillor Blake. Hilary, can I ask you to take the vote to go to part 2?
Yes, Chair. If members would like to vote in the normal way by pressing green for yes, red cross for no, and blue raised hand for abstain. Thank you. Has everybody voted? Okay, can you just give me 2 seconds to count hands, please? Thank you.
Councillor Billing doesn't seem to have voted, Chair.
Yes, yeah, Councillor Billing. Yes, there's no mark against your name. There is now. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I had.
Well, that's 13 in favour, everyone else abstained. So that's not carried, I make it. Okay. I'm just counting the 13. There's more than 26 members here. There's only 13 in agreement.
Yeah, but
Jeanette, can I ask you to comment?
How many against?
How many against, Hilary?
All the rest, none against. All
None
abstain.
against and all abstain, so it's carried, isn't it?
Abstain.
Yeah, it's carried.
Oh, so I do apologise.
Can I just say something?
I'm so sorry. It's carried.
Yeah, so I was with you as well. Okay, right. We will now go. We will now all be sent into an invitation room to go to a breakout room to discuss the part 2 items. Please accept this invitation. You will return to part 1 meeting to consider the part 1 item the same name. If Hilary, if you could set up the Vic,
Yeah,
set up the room.
my colleague Vic will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic.
Okay, councillors, Vic's removed, IT have removed the holding screen, so you can turn your cameras on, and yeah, I will do a roll call. Okay, so as usual, I'm going to call out your surnames. If you can just confirm that you can that you're present. Councillor Albert.
Present.
Alan.
Present.
Aspinwall.
Present.
Billing. Claire. Councillor Claire Billing. I'll come back to Claire in a second. Councillor Judy Billing.
I'm here.
Brown.
Here.
Bryant.
Present.
Clark.
Here.
Collins.
Hello.
Davies.
Here.
Deacon Davies.
Yes, I'm here.
Dennis Harburg.
Here.
Derbyshire.
Present.
Green.
Here.
Harwood. I'll come back to Councillor Harwood in a moment. Hone.
Present.
Hoskins.
Present.
Hewson.
Aye.
Hunter.
Present.
Jarvis.
Present.
Levitt.
Present.
Mantle.
Present.
McNally.
Present.
Moody.
Present.
Morris.
Yes.
Muir. Councillor Muir. Okay, I'll come back to you in a moment. Nash.
Present.
Nguala. Councillor Nguala. Come back to you. Okay, North.
Here.
Oliver.
Here.
Prendergast.
Present.
Rice.
Present.
Ruggiero Chaka.
Present.
Stania.
Present.
Sears Hanscom.
Present.
Strong.
Present.
Fake.
Present.
Tyler.
Present.
Tyson.
Present.
I'll quickly go back to Councillor Claire Billing. Okay.
Hilary, there was a couple of people stuck in the breakout room.
IT, have you closed the breakout room, please? Okay. I'll come back to those after I've called officers. Anthony Roche.
Here.
Jeanette Thompson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ian Fullstone.
Present.
Ian Cooper.
Present.
Nigel Smith. Nigel Smith. Isabel Alagils.
Present.
Uranetta Katavu.
Present.
William Edwards.
Present.
Louise Symes.
Present.
Thank you. And Suzanne Ormsby.
Present.
Thank you. I'll just go back to the councillors. IT, can you confirm that the breakout room is closed?
Yeah, Hilary, I can confirm breakout room is now closed.
Thank you very much. So can I check whether Councillor Claire Billing?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Harwood?
Yes, I'm here now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Muir?
Present.
Councillor Nguala?
Yes, I'm here now.
I think that's everybody. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to apologise to the public that have been waiting for us to return. We've had quite a lot of discussion in part two. We will be divulging all of our discussion now, so there will be no secrets from what's happening. So apologies, we are back now with you. What we need to move on to is items 3 and 4, North Hertfordshire District Council submission local plan notice of motions. The part 1 report will now be presented, following which a single debate will take place regarding both parts, both the part 1 report and the motion. Can I remind members to take heed of the council's advice given in part 2 discussions? Nigel Smith, can I ask you to present?
Chairman, can I just ask a question
Councillor
on the point of order? At what point is it possible to present my amendment then finally?
Can I seek advice?
You can propose it at any point. So if you're proposing it, you need a seconder, and obviously you only deal with one amendment at a time. If you can read out then what your proposed amendment is, so that obviously that can be noted down and then potentially seconded.
Yeah,
I can give a ruling if necessary whether it's lawful.
So Councillor Tyson can do that now, or do we listen to Nigel first?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as has been noted, you've got a substantive report in front of you. I'm not planning on going through it at any length. Just a couple of sort of factual points and points to draw your attention to. Firstly, just one factual update relevant to paragraph 7.31, where it talks about the postponed hearings. Just to confirm that all 3 weeks of the hearings that were originally scheduled to be held in September, October have now been postponed pending the outcome of tonight's meeting. Secondly, in view of the Chair's announcement that these items will be taken together, it will be necessary to amend recommendation 2.1 in your reports to read that the contents of the part 1 and part 2 reports be noted, and delete the words ahead of the debate on the substantive motion, because clearly you're considering them together. And in relation to recommendation 2.3, if I could draw members' attention to paragraphs 8.15 and 8.16 of the report, which identifies 3 possible areas towards which the motion may be directed, namely the question of how much housing do we need, how much housing are we planning to provide, and the buffer, which is essentially the size of the gap between those first 2 figures. As we've set out in the report, we've tried to cover all 3 of those matters and the current position and the issues associated with them. But should the motion be carried, then clearly we'd need some clarity on which combination of those matters you'd be asking officers to reassess and on what basis. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to ask Councillor Tyson to table his amendment next.
On a point of order, Chair, do you want somebody to move the recommendations, as I believe they do have to be moved?
Well, I do. Yeah, I need. I need a proposal and a seconder, but because we're handling both of these at the same, both of these parts at the same time, that's what's causing me the reason to bring in the amendment at this point. Because once I have a proposal and a seconder, we're going to debate. Can I just? Jeanette, can I seek some advice just about order? I want to get Councillor Tyson's proposed amendment in.
Okay, just deal with Councillor Steve Hanscon's point. Move those recommendations and then move on to Councillor the proposed amendment.
All right, then can I have a proposer for the recommendations and the seconder, please?
Just moving that, Chair.
I'm seconding it.
Thank you, Councillor Mantle. Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
So the proposed amendment is one additional sentence at the end, which is to say the work is to be conducted by the officers in consultation.
Sorry, point of order, Chairman. Just for clarity for the public, we've just moved and seconded the item 3 on the agenda, which was the officer's report. Can it just be clear that Councillor Tyson's amendment he's moving is to item 4, not to item 3, which we've had proposed and second, but not voted on yet? So technically, I think we ought to vote on that before he moves an amendment to another item on the report, Chairman.
It's because we're going to only have one vote originally. I think we have to split them in this case then.
Chairman, you're getting some legal advice, I think.
Yes. Jeanette?
I think it's confusing the issues, Councillor Levitt. I think at this point you've obviously moved the recommendations. We're dealing with the amendment, and that's what we're dealing with at this stage. I'm not sure which bit you're talking about voting on. We can come back to the vote on the recommendations. I think
It was distinguishing between items 3 and 4. I think, Jeanette, that's the thing. People could be confused that we're talking about
that
item
is
3.
clear. Both of these items are being dealt with together. They're obviously intrinsically linked, and therefore you'll be dealing with them together. And the proposed amendment was to the motion at 3. So that's what we're dealing with at this particular point.
Okay, Councillor Tyson, then please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. The additional sentence to the motion in agenda item 4 should read, the work is to be conducted by the officers in consultation with the executive member and deputy executive member.
Thank you. Can I have a
Happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
second? Yeah.
Yeah, point of clarification. As the person who moved the original motion, I accept that amendment in full. And if the seconder does, we won't need to debate that specific motion.
No. If you accept it, we don't need to. That's correct.
I'm happy to second it as the seconder of the motion and accept it, so we don't need to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay. So we're now going to debate about the motion itself with the amendment. Hilary, could I ask you if you've got all the wording? Could I ask you to read it for us?
So you want the motion and the amendment?
Which has been agreed, accepted by the proposer and the seconder.
Okay, so the motion, the original motion, the council notes that the projected housing need for North Hertfordshire has reduced as a result of the latest predictions by the Office of National Statistics. The council believes that the proposed allocation of housing sites in the local plan should be reduced to reflect this reduction in projected need and instructs officers to convey this to the inspector as soon as possible and carry out any review work requested by the inspector as a result. And an additional sentence of the work to be conducted by the officers in consultation with the executive member and deputy executive member, I presume, of planning.
Thank you, Hilary. Moving to debate then, I've got some hands up.
Before we do, Chair, just to highlight that 2.3 needs to be dealt with within the debate. So before you go to the final vote on that, you will need to make sure that that is clear. I think that's what we discussed.
Sorry, Jeanette, can you say that again? I didn't quite understand. 2.3.
Well, it's got to be, what we said is that this would have to be clear in accordance with 2.3, what the substantive motion, if they were going to approve it, what scope we're actually talking about and the scale of the modifications when you go to the vote.
Point of order,
So
Chairman.
Clear at that point.
Point of order. The council might not choose to approve recommendation 2.3.
So recommendation 2.3 is that should members be minded to approve the substantive motion, officers are advised of the broad scope and scale of the modifications being sought and the planning justification for these to forward to the inspector.
But it seems to me that that motion seeks to modify, that recommendation seeks to modify a motion. And I can't see any provision in standing orders that allows a recommendation to modify a motion.
I think it's just got to be clear what you're actually voting on in accordance with the advice that you have received and for the reasons you have been advised.
I'm sure we are all clear. We'll all be clear what we're voting on.
There is this question about whether the motion is clear what the officers need to do or not. Certainly some of the members feel it's very clear and others feel it's not so clear. The officers don't feel it's clear. So I'm not sure what to do about 2.3 then. Is that now a separate issue? Jeanette?
Chairman, people keep coming in with a point of order without expressly expressing which point under our orders they come in. But I'm here to tell you now, Chairman, and this is not a point of order, it's a general comment. If you are confused and members are confused, how in the name of goodness are our public, who we are elected to represent, going to understand what the hell we are about? Please, can someone clarify it in part one so that we can lay to bed this nonsense of trying to debate something immensely important covertly, as we have just been probably accused of doing, even though we actually weren't. We were taking advice, we weren't debating it, and I concede that. But this is just an absolute nonsense, Chairman. You've got to get some clarity here. We are serving the wider public.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think it's got to be clear at the vote what you're voting for.
So the motion is very clear in words.
Yeah.
2.3 is asking
But
for
you've
an
been
extension.
advised that you need to make it clear what you're going to ask officers to do.
I must admit, in my opinion, the motion is clear what we're asking the officers to do.
Okay, Chair. Well, that's your decision then.
Chairman, point of clarification. In my agenda, there is a proposed another amendment to the original motion. Could I ask perhaps when we're going to have that? I'm looking at my screen and I'm looking at Councillor Martin Steers-Hanscom.
I've had my hand up for a long time.
Councillor hand up. Yeah. Councillor Martin Hanscom, have you got an amendment? Sorry. Yeah.
Hey.
Chair, thank you. I'm actually speaking as part of the debate, and I will explain. As Councillor Strong is quite correct, I have put out a wording of an amendment, which I should have liked to have moved. I don't believe it is in contradiction to the motion. However, I've been advised that it might be construed so by others, so I'm not going to be moving the amendment. I will therefore be speaking to the debate. And to avoid any confusion, I will make it very clear. I will be asking all members to vote against the motions for the reasons which are outlined in the amendment. So this is my contribution to the debate. The motion raises the issues of the latest estimates of housing need over the local plan period. However, the motion fails to address the lack of housing delivery in the first years of the plan period, which almost totally balances out the reduction in housing needs, as the report before us this evening shows. It also fails to indicate the amount of reduction in the allocation of housing sites the mover believes is possible, which is that discussion that we've had just now, which it seems to me makes things very difficult, and requests from officers have failed to establish this. If we are to keep the process of adoption of the plan on course, we must reject this motion as it is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of that process. We need to be reminded that the plan was approved to be submitted for examination by the Secretary of State under the previous administration. Our joint administration, under the guidance of Councillor Clark and the All-Party Project Board, has continued to follow the procedure to get the plan adopted with such modifications that the inspector agrees. It is in effect now the inspector's plan. It is acknowledged that the number of dwellings required during the plan period has gone down. As I've already said, balanced against this is the failure to deliver the housing numbers required to meet housing need in the first 9 years of the plan period. Indeed, our housing delivery numbers measured against housing need are among the worst in the country. Appendices 1 and 2 of our report this evening show that these two things, reduction in housing need and poor housing delivery, almost completely balance each other out. I'm told informally that the movers would like to take the buffer of 1,650 out of the housing numbers. Perhaps they can clarify that if that's the case. Now, our advice is that we do need some sort of buffer for the plan to be adjudged sound. The original plan had an 8% buffer. So perhaps there are between 500 and 700 dwellings that could be removed from the allocation. But which ones? We would have to examine every site and go through the full consultation again. all in order to make such a marginal change, which could be more than wiped out by any delay or underperformance in housing delivery. Were we to make any significant reduction in the numbers in the plan, we would be left without a 5-year land supply of building land, and therefore open to hostile applications. Now, as members of the Planning Committee know only too well, we rely on the emerging local plan to defend against this type of unsuitable and damaging application, which are a huge threat to our villages, our rural areas and the countryside more generally, and are less open to negotiation to provide the sustainability, social housing, appropriate infrastructure, etc., that we need. Now, successive governments have weakened our planning system, and there are many reasons why we should not be sitting here this evening. The lack of strategic planning, the drawn out nature of the current process, the way housing numbers estimates can change. However, I've made no secret of my concern as leader of this council that this motion, in particular its timing, places this council at great risk. I do prefer to think that the mover of this motion has proposed it in good faith. However, I firmly believe it is ill-judged and based on a false understanding of the planning process. The unfortunate consequence is that he has raised the hopes of all those who, for whatever reason, do not want the plan to be adopted. And believe me, they are false hopes. We could, of course, court short-term popularity with some by passing this motion. But of course, that would not be those who probably not listening to this debate, but who are desperate for an affordable home. If the motion succeeds, unamended by the sort of amendment that I suggested, or is passed, either we would enter an extended period of re-examination all the sites in the plan, with all the dangers I've outlined already, or the inspector would likely stop the process. In that case, we would lose all the other policies in the local plan, and I need to remind you that includes things like the increased percentage of affordable housing. And in that case, we would have to start again under new rules, which would give us much larger numbers and more sites to be found. And some of us were on training on Tuesday evening, where we were told exactly how the government is treating those districts without a local plan. Yes, there are uncertainties over COVID and Brexit, and yes, we've declared a climate emergency and want to build back better and more sustainably. And if we go ahead with a plan, it may be that under the new environment criteria, some of the sites in the plan may not be found acceptable under the normal planning process. But no, the answer is not to torpedo the local plan and risk an uncontrolled free-for-all. Given where we are in the local plan process, we must reject the motion to ensure that we take the responsible course as agreed by the all-party project board over the last months and go ahead with the final stages, seeking an early review of the plan to take stock after some of the uncertainties have become less uncertain. So in conclusion, I urge all colleagues of all parties on this council to reject the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Fake.
Thank you, Chairman. I regret that I had actually left my hand up and hadn't meant to speak, but I have to say I totally endorse Martin Steers-Hanscom's comments. The fact of the matter is that we are facing the probability of a total breakdown in the capacity of this authority to control planning if this stupid motion goes forward. It looks politically wonderful, and I am absolutely certain in my villages there will be many people who will say to me, why didn't you support it? I didn't support it because it is not specific to which village or community will actually save a house, and it certainly is not specific to where we will be going in terms of what government might do to us if we actually abrogate our responsibilities and completely incapacitate ourselves to control the planning process as the whole of the local plan would probably enable us to do. So I cannot support this motion, Chairman, and I'm sorry that that was a bit sort of off the cuff, but essentially I'd left my hand up. You asked me to speak and I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Stanier.
Thank you, Chairman. I did intend to speak. So, at the very first meeting in which I took part as a district councillor, this council almost unanimously declared a climate emergency. I was proud to be a part of that and proud that it was agreed cross-party as well. As we were told some time ago at the start of the meeting, this is a serious decision and means that as this is an emergency, all of us have that in mind as we carry out our roles and tasks for the benefit of the district. But as a planet, our house is on fire. We know that unless we take some fairly drastic action, global warming of several degrees is inevitable. Some believe it's already inevitable. This discussion about how many additional houses to build on land that could be used to provide food or to promote biodiversity that could act as lungs for our planet is the equivalent of discussing how many sacks of fuel to pour onto the fire. Every piece of green that we remove from our district is injuring the ability of the planet and its ecosystems to recover from the massive harm we as human beings are doing to it. This is why I'm supporting the motion to look at reducing the number of sites included in the plan. This is not about short-term popularity, nor is it about short-termism at all. Of course, we still need to build houses, but we need to be smart about it, and we need to change the way we do things to minimise the harm to our planet. We need to build up, not out, and make better use of land that's already occupied. I want my children to live in a world that has not been irreparably damaged by its inhabitants. I want to be able to look them in the eye when they grow up and tell them that I did everything I could to preserve what little green space we have left on this crowded isle and to mitigate global warming, not add to it. I believe that allowing additional houses to be built in our green areas, houses that we're not even sure we need, will be letting down the whole planet. We all agreed that there is a climate emergency. We now need to act like it's an emergency and do something tangible today to prevent an increased impact on our environment. We agreed when we declared a climate emergency to do everything in our power to achieve zero carbon emissions in our district by 2030. This means we have 10 years. The local plan we're discussing tonight runs for another 11 years. Do not rely on the developers to reduce emissions. If we don't act now to mitigate the huge amount of CO2 this local plan currently commits the district to pumping into the atmosphere, it will be too late. We will have failed our electors, we will have failed our children and grandchildren, to whom we will be passing custody of the earth in due course. We will have failed our planet. We must act now. And Mr. Chairman, in view of the importance of this issue to the public, I would like to request a recorded vote.
Duly noted. Thank you, Carol. Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's just a pity that Councillor Steers' Hanscom amendment was thought to not be admissible, because actually I would have been pleased to second that as it happens. Because I think it was a very good amendment. It offers the possibility there of both extending the period of the local plan over a much longer period and spreading the growth. And it also brings in the possibility there of an early review of the local plan, which we've already offered I think it was on the third day of the hearings back in July 2017. And we already offered that to the inspector to do an early review, to look at the numbers, look at the sites again, depending on growth and demand at the time. And that's already been an offer that's been made to the inspector. I'm going to be a little bit more blunt than Councillor Steers Hanscom. This motion before us is nothing more or less than an attempt to have political interference in the planning process that has been in progress since 2017. If you pass this motion, what it will do is it will put us at significant risk of a judicial review. That's going to cost us tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. It gives us the possibility of the inspector either instructing us to withdraw our plan or, at the very least, long delays to the plan. It's already cost us round about £1.5 million, and it could cost us a lot more, especially if it's withdrawn. It could cost us easily that again, if we're allowed to keep control of it. Because it does also give us, if you vote for this, significant risk of central government intervening and taking the whole of the planning decision process away from us. Not just the local plan, but all our planning decisions. It also invites hostile applications from developers for failing to determine applications that are already in, as we do not have a plan in place, or we're not making significant progress towards making one anymore. More importantly, it stops the public having the chance to make their representations to the inspector. We've mentioned it in the part 2 that there's been many letters to us as members. Many of those people have made representations to the inspector. If the plan is pulled or delayed for a long time, they will not be able to make those representations on the individual sites, Chairman. It also, this motion, gives no specific guarantees about any sites being removed, never mind specific sites. It just says we will review it. No timescales, no nothing. We've already offered that to the Inspector, Chairman, and the Inspector will probably take us up on it. No need for this motion. It also prevents us getting a 10% increase in the green belt in North Herts, which was planned to be an essential buffer between the growth of Luton and the growth of North Herts, particularly to the west of Hitchin. That's not something that's mentioned very often, that we actually were putting another 10% into the green belt. It also gives us, it takes away from us our ability to control development on our terms, because those terms will be set by others. It takes away our ability to add to a local plan with supplementary planning documents. If you don't have a local plan, you can't have supplementaries to it. We had a recent one on design, which has been approved and taken forward. And Councillor Collins knows we can alter that to make the plan much better. We've also mentioned and discussed in the past another proposed supplementary planning document relating to tightening up on climate change and the impact of it on the environment. We can't do that if we haven't got a local plan, Chairman. And most importantly, what it does stop us doing is, Councillor Steers-Hanscom has mentioned it, is the need for homes and affordable homes and people to live and our families to live, not just now, but for the future generations. This plan in it has a provision to provide affordable homes. On the current numbers, the revised numbers, that would give us approximately 4,680 affordable homes in the district. The plan, in one of its policies, provides for about 60% of that to be affordable, social or rented accommodation. Do you really want to put a motion forward and pass a motion that denies that to our future generations, Chairman? I'll say no more. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. Councillor Dennis Harburg.
Thank you, Chair. Wow. I think that we can all agree that this is not going to be a simple vote tonight. And I think all of us in the room, and certainly all of the people who have chosen to watch this meeting on YouTube, understand and appreciate that there are serious concerns about the sensitive and appropriate development that's needed in this district, and obviously for each of us parochially in our individual wards. And we're all very conscious that there's a housing crisis in this country, and our children and grandchildren will, and actually are, struggling to get on the property ladder, or even just to find some sort of sensible housing which meets their needs. So as a planning authority, we have got a really difficult balance to strike between all of the competing needs in determining what's going to be in the best interests of this district. Now, North Herts is one of the last authorities in the country, I think, to have its local plan adopted. And we all know why it took so long to get to this very tortuous stage that we're now at with this particular inspector. And I feel that here is not necessarily the time to be going through and examining those issues, so we'll park them. For me, the relevant question is, for all of us this evening, is moderately simple given the complexity of the overarching issue. The question we need to ask ourselves as councillors, and we should always have in the forefront of our minds every single day when performing our role, is what is in the best interests of the people that we collectively represent. Now, this motion, left as it is, completely unamended, or even with the amendment that the opposition group has proposed, essentially reduces our housing need, but it doesn't explain how that's going to be achieved. It doesn't say how we will identify the sites to reduce or which ones we're going to scrap. It doesn't tell us how much longer this is going to take or what the impact will be on our vital infrastructure projects that are coming up across the district. Now, if I want to be parochial, which I do, I could focus on my own ward in Walsworth and think about Stockfold Road, which is an extremely dangerous stretch at this moment in time. Traffic calming and resolution of the issues around that are linked and tied in intrinsically to the High Over Farm development, which forms part of this local plan. Now, if the local plan stalls, how much longer is it going to take for me to get something in place to help my residents and to protect them from cars speeding down that road? These residents are living in fear potentially of cars careening off the road into their homes again. We had an incident not long ago, some of you might remember. Now, we can all have a visceral reaction to what building in one area or another might mean for us and our parochial interests, but that doesn't necessarily make that reaction a rational reaction. And for me, I feel that what we do know is that there will be delays if this motion is carried. We've heard and had advice from legal counsel around sort of the potential risks and pitfalls of those delays. And we know that there will be costs. There'll be legal and administrative issues as part of the normal/new normal application process that will have to be followed as a result of this amendment. And then they will be aggravated should developers who've begun to work on proposals and applications start proceeding against this council or be unhappy with the actions that this council has taken. Now, for years, central government has cut local authority budgets. This year, dealing with the pandemic and its aftermath, our budgets have been affected even more harshly and reduced more than we would have liked. Do we really have the funds to fight all of the legal battles and deal with the administrative and resource costs that this motion will inevitably have? And I would question, rhetorically, of course, what services we will sacrifice in order to achieve the support that this motion needs to be a success. How much resource will we need to do this work and to defend it? What projects and work programs are going to fail as a result of this motion? And what will the net result of all that be? Will it create a better North Hertfordshire? I don't know. I'm just posing the questions for others to consider in this debate. The plan we have was imposed on us by the previous administration. Fine, I'm over it. We must pick up the pieces and we've got to try and make the thing work. And actually, I think that's what Councillor Clark has been doing in his portfolio as exec member with responsibility for this area, with the new SPDs and the other policies that Councillor Levitt has referenced. I feel then that the choice that we have is to vote for increased financial risk, administrative burden and uncertainty, or in the alternative to continue with a plan which we might not find completely palatable. I might not like everything about High Over Farm, but I like hostile developers and this council having schemes imposed upon the district which don't actually consider its unique character even less. So, once again, as for those of us who were on this council sometime for when the original debate was held in the Leisure Centre, I find myself voting not to actually protect a plan I'm uncomfortable with, but rather to mitigate against the risks and protect the residents I represent from a far worse alternative.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. So I find myself thinking, here we are again, we're at another extraordinary meeting shortly after our last one, called by a group who have a motion so urgent they don't think it can wait. And now, while I'm not going to complain about that, how can I? We called the last one, and frankly, a phrase about imitation and flattery springs to mind. But there are some key differences here too. The last time it was an emergency issue that we felt needed urgent debate. And this time, this is an issue the council has had on its radar for years, and which the administration have had 18 months in which to decide upon a policy. Yet it feels the need for an extraordinary meeting only 2 weeks after our last full council, at which this motion could easily have been debated. Now, a cynic might be inclined to think that this meeting has been called at this particular time in order to attract maximum publicity by coinciding with the rescheduled local plan hearings and forcing their postponement yet again. Well, with the above in mind, I decided to see what the council has been doing with its last year and a half of planning policy. And there's been lots of correspondence with the inspector, and this bit particularly caught my eye regarding the 5-year housing supply. And this says, equally, the council has resisted a number of hostile applications on sites not proposed for allocation in the plan. Several of these were sustained at appeal during 2018, and these appeal decisions were predicated, at least in part, upon the anticipated resolution of the council's current 5-year supply issues through the new local plan in the future. Ongoing delays in the local plan examination place the council's abilities to sustain such a position in future appeals at risk. Obviously, our policy at the moment is that the plan must go ahead on schedule. And there's this one regarding the reduced housing figures. And this bit's even in bold. It is important to be clear that the council is not proposing the removal of any sites from the plan. The reduction in projected delivery arises solely from the forecast completion of several strategic sites now extending beyond 2031. Now, I bring this document up because it was sent to the inspector only at the end of last year, having gone through cabinet, as which we all know the leader of the Liberal Democrats sits as the executive member for planning. Is this a case of the Lib Dems rebelling against their own policy? Or with all the publicity around this meeting and everything we've just heard in part 2 about the consequences of accepting this motion, is this sadly the case that the motion is designed to fail, to allow the Lib Dems to appear to support something in public whilst doing the complete opposite in private? I'm afraid this impression is not helped by the social media policy around this, where every community feedback group I know, community Facebook group I know, is suddenly filled with exactly the same post suggesting this motion could affect their local sites. And the only difference from one post to the next being the sites it claimed could be affected. It begins to sound very much like the old National Lottery adverts telling every person it could be you. But after all of that, I do hope you'll forgive my cynicism, because I do desperately want to support the intent here, if not for it being very hard to do so when the entire presentation of this has been steeped in what appears to be political point scoring. So my question to the administration would be this: can you give me a firm assurance tonight that if this motion is successful, then in the revised local plan, the land northeast of Stevenage, including the area known as Foster Country, will retain its greenbelt status? And if that assurance can be made without the usual weasel words and we'll try to see what we can do, then I would support this motion despite my misgivings.
Thank you, George. Councillor Clark or Councillor Collins, should I ask you if you want to respond?
Chair, I'll respond at the end of the meeting with my right to reply.
Okay. Okay, in that case, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I originally supported the development of our local plan. Nearly 10 years into a 20-year plan period, our world has changed. Members will remember that we agreed that we are in the midst of a climate emergency, and now there's also a pandemic. We've expended an enormous amount of effort trying to modify the plan: emails, public hearings, representations, and council meetings, trying in vain to change the course of events. I thought that some of the thousands of representations from the people that elect us would have been seriously considered. However, not one of the shortlisted sites has been omitted from the plan. The plan is not about being environmentally friendly, appropriate, or sustainable. It's about being sound, whatever that means. We all know that we don't have a 5-year land supply and are told that's why we need to finalise the plan to stop the threat of hostile property developers. I represent rural villages beyond Greenbelt. I do not represent the delightful green-belted towns of Hitchin, Letchworth, or Baldock, where even without a 5-year land supply or a plan, the reality is there's been no serious development on any green belt. I always thought that the visionary creation of green belt protected the countryside and our towns. We now know that the plan will not protect our valuable green belt, nor will it stop unsustainable housing being tacked on inappropriately to our villages. The motion may be opportunistic, but it's also the right thing to do. Housing numbers are clearly too high, and this motion should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. Councillor Pendergast.
Thank you, Chair. It is absolutely clear that the current numbers within the local plan will lead to large overdevelopment within our district, and this will have an adverse impact on our communities and, very importantly, the Greenbelt. We must do our very best to protect the Greenbelt from overdevelopment and ensure that any plan reflects the needs of our communities. We have pledged, and rightly so, to be a more inclusive and listening council. Well, it's time to listen. There is a large swathe of support from local residents in relation to this motion, and it is absolutely clear as to why. Of course, more housing is required throughout the whole country, but it is essential that not only does it meet the demands of local people, but that it is the right type of housing. We need more social and affordable housing. The dangers of overdevelopment are all too obvious and have the potential for overzealous developers to take advantage of this, and it will not provide the property the district is in need of. I regularly sit on the Planning and Control Committee and have become increasingly frustrated by developers using the guise of financial viability to not provide enough affordable housing. Overdevelopment will certainly not solve this problem. Finally, it is a duty for all of us to recognise that we declared a climate change emergency not so long ago. To allow overdevelopment to occur on our Greenbelt would be to ignore this fact, and in my view, that is totally unacceptable. We can and must ensure that the local plan is fit for purpose and that it keeps fully in mind future generations. I hope all members can fully understand the strength of feeling of our residents on this matter and will vote in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Mantle.
Mr. Chairman, I listened with interest to Councillor Stanier's comments. I would point out that the one thing this motion doesn't achieve is the objective she sets out, because all it does, it means that we lose control over the developments that happen in the district, and we will no longer have the ability to make sure that any development that goes on meets these new criteria. I would point out that at the moment, all the policies which we're operating under date from the early 1990s, and they are sadly out of date. Only by getting a local policy plan adopted will we have able to get sufficient control and sufficient updated criteria, policies relating to environment, infrastructure, housing quality that we need. And you talk about the people of North Hertfordshire. I reckon there's a fair number of people in North Hertfordshire who would love there to be more social housing and affordable housing so that they no longer have to live 2 and 3 families in one house. The whole planning policy process is flawed, but that's not our fault, that's the government's. And the fact that it's taken this long to get the local plan in is just beyond belief. I think we must be aiming to get a record.
Sorry, for some reason I muted myself. Councillor Hunter. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Interesting times. I've never actually played politics with planning my entire life that I've been involved in it, and I don't intend to do so with a local plan. My feelings and views reference the local plan remain the same since it was agreed to be submitted in 2017. This was a government initiative which forced all authorities to create and dictated to us from outside bodies and their influence to put a plan together. The way that it was formulated, in my opinion, was simply wrong. No joined up thinking, reference infrastructure, and the overall effect it had on our communities. We're going to have 10 plans in Hertfordshire and surrounded by others, whether it be in Bedfordshire, Cambs, Bucks, Essex, and even London. I firmly believe what local plans are doing is creating tomorrow's problems. And as in 2017, Chairman, I intend to abstain because I think the principle that we're starting with is totally wrong and it will not create a better future. I realise the ramifications, I realise the housing need, but currently we're in a situation that I personally feel is wrong. Town and country planners did the right thing. They worked on the premise of looking across border. They looked at the infrastructure, they looked at the education, they looked at the jobs, they looked at leisure, they looked at everything. What we're doing with these local plans is just looking at everything in isolation, and it will create problems for our communities and our children for the future of this particular region and the entire UK. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Every elected member in this virtual room cares about the local plan. This isn't like Westminster, where MPs can seem distant. District councillors are ordinary local people. We make decisions affecting ourselves, our neighbours, our friends, our families. We all have that in common from across the parties. Where we differ is what we think is the best way to achieve the best outcomes for our area. I wasn't a councillor when this plan was written. I wish that the local plan process allowed that I could make not my own voice heard, but the voices of the people that I represent, most particularly on the topic of environmental impact. However, no matter how frustrated I am, I understand that I'm not a solicitor, I'm not a QC, and my role as a district councillor, among other things, is to listen to qualified, experienced advice when it is offered to me. I did listen to that advice and I understand now the risks behind any decision I make. It is highly probable that passing this motion wouldn't achieve the end of saving the Greenbelt. We do all need to behave like there is a climate emergency because there is one. And if I believed that passing this motion would save our Greenbelt, then I would vote for it. But if we scupper our local plan, we won't achieve that aim because no plan at all isn't environmentally friendly and no plan at all isn't fit for purpose. If a member of any party brought me a legally possible plan that would allow us to make a local plan which fitted my own idea of how a plan should look, I would vote for it. But it's with deep sadness I have to tell you that I can't, because I haven't been brought that practical plan today, and I don't choose to pretend that it would be wise to take enormous risks with public time and money on a wing and a prayer.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chair. We agreed in the council constitution some time ago for plain English, and therefore for the members of the public that are listening, and arguably some of the councillors, I wish to be as clear as possible and succinct in my comments. I am sympathetic, Sam, Councillor Collins, with the intent of the motion. But let me be clear. If we do not have a local plan, we will be hostage to rogue planning applications, unable to strategically plan where those houses are and the infrastructure to support them. To be clear, having a local plan, applications still have to go and get planning permission, which amongst other things will allow us to plan environmentally responsibly. And I must say, I do fully agree with what Councillor Stanier was saying about the environment. But by having a local plan, let me be clear, these applications still have to get planning permission. And moreover, as a council, once the inspector has independently inspected the plan, we still have an opportunity to vote on it, to approve it, or to vote against it. This motion, if approved, will lead to an uncontrolled free-for-all. We must listen to the professional advice we've been given, and we must vote against it and have control of our own destiny. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. I think many points have already been made in this debate, and I think this motion, for me, it's challenging the process that we are in. We voted 3 years ago to put a draft local plan out to an inspector, and I understand that there are councillors here today that weren't in that chamber when we voted to do that. And it is rather, and the point has been made, it is rather sort of strange to me that we're about to start a second a number of hearings with the inspector, and it's at this point the Lib Dems have decided to bring this motion as an extraordinary meeting to the council. So in fact, what they've done is they're undermining that process. They're undermining what the inspector was supposed to be doing with the hearings he was about to start at the end of beginning of this month. And those hearings have been very important, I know, to a number of people that are in this district, because it gives those people the opportunity to go to the inspector and to put their case about the sites and the numbers, and to look at the sites and the numbers. And I was hoping that we would very shortly get a recommendation back from the inspector on our local plan in its draft form, so that we could then take the advice that he's going to give us, that's if he's allowed to give it, and we could then have that debate. So this motion of the Lib Dems is just trying to derail that process that we're in. Now, one of the areas that I represent, a couple of them, in the wards, because we've been having what we've been calling our emerging local plan, we've had hostile applications in on land that has not been submitted in the local plan for building on. And the council has been able to defend those sites because they were not in the emerging plan, and therefore they could be refused. And at appeal, those appeals by those applicants were lost. If we don't have a plan, we leave our council open. Now, for any of the members that haven't attended the training on planning, you need to go, because it's very, very clear the importance of having a local plan in your authority, because it's where you decide that you need to have the homes built. And what anybody says, we know that there is a need for homes. There's a need for affordable homes. And there's a need to have those homes built in such a way under the planning and guidance of this council that meets our new green agenda. So we need to move forward. We need to get our local plan agreed. And this motion is doing nothing, absolutely nothing, to try to get the security that this council needs within a local plan. Therefore, I'm afraid I cannot support it.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I, like some others, was not here when the plan was first approved in 2017. But I understand that at that time there were already some serious concerns about this plan, from not only from members of the District Council, but also from Herts County Council and many local residents. And I speak to you also as Chair of Planning, having been on the Planning Committee for 2 years. I have attended the training that Claire referred to, and I do understand the concerns and the risks. I also want to point out that this motion is in no way politically motivated. It's about doing what we as the Lib Dem group feel is the best thing for our residents. Since the time that plan was originally approved by this council, there have been a number of significant material changes which have amplified the concerns that were expressed at that time. Firstly, the objectively assessed need. This number is based on information from the Office of National Statistics about population demographics and migration, and crucially, it's independent, it's objective. The amount of additional housing expected to be required in North Herts between 2011 and 2031 has been reduced twice since the local plan was written. And whilst there is most definitely a need for housing, and especially, as has been mentioned by several members, affordable and social housing within the district, the requirement is now significantly less than originally projected. And this revised number does include the housing that has already been built and reflects the number that is required over the whole period. In its response to the inspector, the council confirmed that this number that has been this reduction, it represents a meaningful change, and yet has not yet decided to make amends to the plan as a result. Secondly, we have declared a climate change emergency, and we resolved as a council to consider all decisions in the light of this since May 2019. The local plan currently includes a number of large sites for development within the Greenbelt, and many of these sites which fail to meet the more stringent sustainability criteria, including transport and water supply. And I think our chalk streams have already been mentioned. We passed a motion around those. And these sustainability criteria that are expected to, and in a climate emergency are much more stringent now. The sites allocated within the local plan should be reviewed according to their sustainability, with a view to retaining as much green belt as possible. And as far as planning permission is required, it's been pointed out that even if they're in the plan, they still require planning permission. But we've been advised that once they're in the plan, they have agreement in principle to develop on those sites, and the planning permission will be about what is built, the layout, the design, and that kind of thing. But it will not allow us to take sites out once the plan is adopted. So it agrees planning in principle. Thirdly, COVID-19 pandemic. There have been significant changes to lifestyles and working practices as a result of the need to reduce transmission of the coronavirus. Despite the easing of restrictions, there's not yet been a return to the previous levels of commuting. It's difficult to predict at what point and to what extent workplaces will expect staff to return to offices. However, I think there is a good chance that many staff will continue to work from home for the foreseeable future, at least on a part-time basis. In 2018, for the first time in 20 years, net migration in the district dropped below zero. And given the district's attraction to London commuters, the continuation of remote working is likely to result in a further decrease in net migration and consequent further reduction in housing need. And fourthly, green space and mental well-being. The recent lockdown has demonstrated the value of green space to our mental well-being and the negative impact of our modern lifestyles on biodiversity, air quality, and noise pollution. And interestingly, today is National Clean Air Day. We should determine to do everything we can to retain as much of our green space and countryside for the good of our present and future residents. The inspector has requested a clear response from this council in regard to the reduction of the objectively assessed need for housing, and due to the level of public concern regarding this, has chosen to conduct hearings to address this issue. There's been a huge amount of public support for this motion, and it would be foolish for this council to continue to pursue a plan which was based on evidence from a very different time. I appreciate there are risks involved in any action, but there is also a substantial risk involved in inaction, and it's a question of balance. And to my mind, the significant changes that have happened since the plan was first put together and approved constitute a much greater risk than some of the other risks that have been addressed tonight. So in view of these changes, I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman. It's more than 3 years ago now when the council last discussed the local plan and voted to approve it when some of us objected on the grounds that it appeared that the number of houses and the consequent impact on the Greenbelt were both unjustified and excessive. Now, I know that there were councillors who agreed about that, but felt that they had to approve the plan because they were told that we had to meet the government's target, who said we needed 13,800 houses. And of course, in the intervening 3.5 years, the council's position has continued to be that it has no current plan, while that has progressed very slowly. But in July, the projections from the Office of National Statistics did produce a significant change in the assessment of housing need. The ONS believes that we now need half as many houses as was projected back at the time when the plan was agreed. And even if we apply all the uplifts and factors that could possibly be justified, and then we add on an arbitrary 10% for market signals, we only get to a number 2,000 fewer than the number of houses that the plan is currently proposing should be built. But it appears that the suggestion is we then just call that the rest a buffer and just continue to support the same level of building that was necessary, that was believed to be necessary in the past. And we're told that the reason that we should do that is that if we attempt to make any changes, this will upset some of the housing developers and they might challenge it. But our role is not to do what the developers want. Our responsibility is to identify the sites necessary to provide the housing that the district needs. It's our responsibility to do that in a sustainable way and with the necessary infrastructure. And it's our responsibility to protect the green spaces and the environment of our district. Providing a big buffer so developers can pick and choose which sites they develop and which sites they don't won't achieve any of those objectives and won't achieve the development of any more social or affordable housing either. Now, of course, as several people have pointed out, the council has submitted the plan to the inspector and it's the inspector that is now in control of it. But as some other members have pointed out, the inspector has asked the council 2 questions in the light of the Office for National Statistics projections. The first one he asked was whether or not these projections represented a meaningful change in the housing situation in North Hertfordshire. And the council has responded that it believes it does, and I think we probably all agree with that. He also asked if there has been a meaningful change, should the local plan housing requirements be modified to reflect it? Now, presumably he asked that question because he wanted to know the council's view on the answer. And this motion proposes that the council's answer to that question should be yes. Now, of course, the inspector may decide, as was pointed out earlier, that he doesn't agree with that answer and that the plan should continue unmodified. And if he does, I'm afraid that's his decision, and however much we might regret it, there will be no more we can do about it. If, however, he does agree, it seems likely that he will ask the council to propose modifications to the plan to reflect the lower numbers, and the motion sets out the mechanism by which we believe that should happen. And incidentally, I don't think it would be appropriate for us to have a debate in the meeting of this sort as to which site to include and which site to exclude. That's something that should be determined by a proper objective process run by the officers and approved by them. Now, we do need a local plan. I don't think anyone denies that. But we need one that meets the local housing needs whilst minimising the impact on our green spaces and our environment. Now, the ONS has perhaps rather unexpectedly given us a last opportunity to have another look at that. We've spent more than 3 years on this local plan, and in my view, we can afford to take just a few more months to get it right. Now we've been given an opportunity to do that. I hope that you will agree that we should take this opportunity to do the right thing for our district and vote for this motion this evening.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Hewson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks everybody for talking. Lots of food for thought here. In my mind, it's all the uncertainty around the major issues that we're facing as a council in the country. I guess you've got Brexit, got the climate crisis, and we have the pandemic, which is far from over and I think is here to stay. And I say this as somebody who's working on one of the vaccines. We don't really know how any of these things are going to pan out. However, they almost certainly will affect the way people live and work over the coming years. And that was actually pointed out by Councillor Brown. Now, these numbers could go up again, they could go down again. We don't know at this stage. I'm pretty sure they will stay. Maybe if we keep doing this, the council chamber could be turned into a couple of flats with some nice views of the car park or something. We just don't know at this stage. But I don't think that this motion really, as has been said before, really has the effect that a lot of the members are saying it will have. It removes a lot of the safeguards. It removes a lot of what hard work that people have done into it to ensure that we have affordable housing in the district. If we torpedo the plan, we put ourselves at a lot of risk, and we could really spend the next few years, diverting much needed and dwindling resources, fighting developers even harder, and stop trying and failing to stop them building on the green belt that we so desperately want to protect. So far from addressing, all these concerns, this motion really does put us at greater risk in my mind. And I think it really is best to try and see this through as best we can. It's been worked on for, I don't know, 7 years already. Get it done, get it out there, but review as soon as possible once we have as much more information. And I know there are genuine concerns about the plan, which I certainly share, but I think we're so far along the road, if we risk starting again, it's just too risky in my mind. So if we could deny this motion and then get the local plan in place and then review it at the earliest opportunity, I don't think that more uncertainty is the answer here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Albert.
Thanks, Chair. And first of all, I think to thank Councillor Collins and Councillor Brown for bringing us this motion. I think it's a really important debate that we're having this evening, and I'm not afraid that we should be having this debate. I think it's right to do so. I guess I wish it would have been sooner, but I think it's right that we have this important discussion. And I also see, and I think it's really interesting in listening to colleagues this evening, and I was particularly struck by the words of Councillor Oliver. I mean, it very much is. I think this is not an issue of party politics here. This is where there is clearly different views across all the parties this evening. It's about style. It's about tactics. It's about how we look to approach in trying to get the best for our district. Now, I was one of those that voted against the local plan in 2017 for lots of the reasons that Councillor Jarvis mentioned, for lots of the reasons I think around infrastructure and so on. But I think what I also recognised in there that there was particularly strong work that especially some of our predecessor colleagues, particularly I think on the Labour side, but obviously Liberal Democrat colleagues as well, about how we actually got what was a significant increase in the percentage of affordable homes in the district. And I know Councillor Levitt touched on that earlier. And that really was an achievement. And I think it is a shining star in that local plan, much as though I had some doubt and concern around the overall style of the plan. I've listened very carefully to what our QC, our lawyer, has said, and I think it is important in actually listening to those things around, particularly around the dangers of intervention from the Secretary of State if there is further delay to the plan. It's right that if this motion is carried, that we do carry out a full and proper public consultation, but that also comes with risks about whether we could face judicial review, public and also Secretary of State intervention. I think it's also right in saying this, and yes, I think we can all be clear that whilst obviously we might have concerns around the local plan, it was only last week that we had a meeting around Hitchin station access, and indeed I know that Councillor Clark and officers brought to that meeting about the benefits that would come if and it's a big if, that Highover Farm was approved, that actually would come in helping us to deliver infrastructure like Hitchin station access. And I think these are factors that we need to consider, whilst obviously also recognising that doesn't mean that we should agree any old housing anywhere, anytime, in any place. But also I want to draw attention to colleagues to something I said last week or a couple of weeks ago now, when moving the medium-term financial strategy. Because whilst it might not be absolutely explicit in that strategy, it does still assume that the local plan will be adopted. Our forecasts in the medium and longer term are likely to be even worse if the plan was not adopted or delayed. It should be noted that the strategy is also a plan with a 5-year time horizon. And there will be a time lag between the adoption of the local plan and people moving into properties and starting to pay council tax. But that time lag is likely to be longer than usual in a period where we're faced with the economic conditions that they are at the moment, and we've still got potential Brexit impacts. And as I said in that paper in paragraph 2.32, that one of those things about economic recovery and the adoption of a plan could result in housing growth in later years, and also would mean that we would, as a council, be able to deliver the kind of services that we want to see, and actually not having a local plan or be forced to be getting one imposed upon us, it will actually come, I believe, with significant risks. Now, as I say, I started off by saying I think this is a really important discussion, and I really thank Sam and Ruth for bringing it to us. I think the joint administration has made great progress and steps under Councillor Clark and Councillor Mantle in terms of developing our planning policies. But I do think passing this motion will be a leap into the dark. And that's where I have struggled with this, and I've really struggled with this for days. But I do think, for me, that leap in the dark is something I don't think we can take. And that's why reluctantly, and it is reluctantly, colleagues, that I would ask you to oppose the motion. And I think actually let us move forward into those hearings. But as I say, yes, I think we can I think all recognise that, and colleagues here have recognised this evening how difficult an issue it is. But as I say, on balance, I believe that I will be voting to oppose the motion. But I do thank colleagues for actually bringing it to us, because it's right that we have this debate in an open and transparent way. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. I hadn't intended to speak tonight, but I think due to the direction in which the debate has gone, I would just like to put across a couple of points for members to consider. The first point is the actual wording of the motion, and in particular, the part of the sentence where it says, the local plan should be reduced to reflect the reduction in projected need and instructs officers to convey this to the inspector. Now, as I believe it was Councillor Levitt said earlier, the local plan is currently in the gift of the inspector. And so all of this talk around the local plan being torpedoed or judicial review, if we convey what we believe is the right thing to do for the local plan, the inspector could say no. I would be highly surprised if the inspector were to turn around to an officer who knocked on his door and said, would you mind reducing the numbers, and start removing the local plan from every aspect of what we've done so far and start torpedoing the local plan, I believe was the phrase. And I think my second point is something that has been conveyed to us on a fairly regular occasion, is the message that was given to us by the peer review, and that was that we should be brave. Now, I don't believe that I have actually heard any councillor in this debate so far raise a point against this motion that isn't due to the potential risks. Now, I believe that we should continue along the lines of what the peer review has said and what the council has already agreed to in its action plan from the peer review. Be brave and not cower behind the possibility of some of the things that may or may not happen. We want to convey a message to the planning inspector that the numbers of houses that we need in the local plan should be reduced, nothing more and nothing less.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Derbyshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I completely agree with everything that my fellow Letchworth councillor Ian Mantle said earlier. It's ludicrous we are still working on a local plan which is older than myself. As the youngest councillor, as the youngest member of this council, and probably one of the few who is directly affected by the housing shortage this country faces, I will be voting against this motion. By voting for this motion, I fear that the plan will have to be completely rewritten, which means more delay in delivering much needed homes, which will only exacerbate the housing crisis locally. I also fear, like so many others have said tonight, that if this motion passes, we will lose our planning rights as a council, which will mean we will have no say in the future development in this district, denying our residents a right to say through us. In conclusion, don't be ignorant to the fact that this country is in a housing crisis. We are. There are many people having to live in multi-generational households at the moment who cannot afford to leave their homes and are having to bring up their own children in their family homes with their parents. And this district is, if this motion passes tonight, we are slowing down the process to deliver social housing and affordable housing to house those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short but sweet. I think that this has been put forward by the Liberal Democrats with no research whatsoever. We do need stronger rules. We do need better rules on housing. However, I've listened to my residents. I've listened to the people that have been writing to the Comet. I have listened to the people that have been posting on social media, that have been emailing me. And I have been elected by them to speak their views. I will have to support this.
Thank you, Daniel. Councillor Collins.
I think time for right of reply, unless anybody else wants to speak. So
we've got no other hands raised, so please.
Yeah.
Proceed.
So I'll dive in for right of reply. There's been some frankly quite daft comments being made in this debate about the motion being silly. It's quite simply not. It was very definitely researched, as you're aware, Chair, and I think everybody in the Liberal Democrat group knows how much time we put into it. And it's not silly to try and protect our environment or the future of our area. So another point I'd like to highlight is the inspector's questions at ED 194. I mentioned it earlier on. They remain unanswered. If this motion doesn't pass, then it's impossible to answer those questions. And it's quite possible that that in itself will result in the plan being kicked out, resulting in all the negative effects we've heard about. So that in itself is a big risk. And so we need to pass the motion to have those questions to be sensibly and logically responded to. What the motion does is open the door to us as a council to look at the implications of the local plan and to do the right thing. If the original plan had enough sites to accommodate the numbers in the original plan, then it's surely some of those sites are surplus to requirement now. It's simple mathematics. There are a number of options on how to proceed, and if the motion passes, that really should be discussed jointly with officers and members. The amendment says that, and Councillor Jarvis addressed that really, really well. But if the motion is not passed, then those discussions can't take place. So to vote against this motion or to abstain is simply an act of ecological vandalism, quite frankly, and it shows no regard for our district or its future. To just carry on regardless without making any changes is like being the captain of the Titanic and not changing course when you spot the iceberg coming at you. So it doesn't reduce or stop affordable housing being built. That's a nonsense. And to those on the Conservative virtual benches, I direct you to some of the comments made by Sir Oliver Heald just over a month ago, who identified the exact same issues that we're talking about tonight. Stephen McPartland, the MP for Stevenage, said exactly the same thing. Some Hitchin councillors have indicated that they will vote against this motion. Then they are directly voting in favour of the Highover Farm development. They need to be aware of that because the public will be very much aware of that, and they may remember that in May. They may be reminded. To Councillor Davis, you asked me a direct question about so-called foster country. Well, that's not in the local plan at all because it's in Stevenage, so I can't answer your question. This local plan doesn't affect that, but sites GA1 and GA2 in Great Ashby, I think they're a disaster. And if you agree with me, which I think you do, and you want to have any chance of stopping those developments going ahead, then you need to vote for this amendment, because if you don't or you abstain, you're voting for those sites to be developed. Councillor McNally, he's been on the record talking about sites in Bulldog. If he votes against this motion, it's the same story. He's voting in favour of those sites in Bulldog. The public will notice that. I think Councillor Morris, he's expressed concerns about a development in Barkway. Same thing. If he votes against this motion or abstains, he's voting in favour of them. And then finally, Councillor Levitt bizarrely called this meeting political interference, which is quite a remarkable statement from one councillor to make about a council motion. Yes, it is political. But if by political you mean acting in the interest of the people that each one of us is elected to represent, yes, it's political to do the right thing for the future of our district and the future of our residents. So yeah, it is, in the words of Skunk and Anansi, political. So I ask you all to support this motion, because we aren't going to be able to go back from here. And if you vote against this motion or abstain, you are going to be trashing our local environment, and you are bringing on really bad sites for our entire area, and you will be held responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I've got no other hands raised. Does anybody else like to speak before we move into the vote?
Chairman, they can't because he just wound up.
Right, yes, good point. Right, Hilary, if I could ask you to read the motion as amended for us before we go into the vote.
Certainly, Chair. I have the council notes that the projected housing need for North Hertfordshire has reduced as a result of the latest predictions by the Office for National Statistics. The council believes that the proposed allocation of housing sites in the local plan should be reduced to reflect this reduction in projected need, and instructs officers to convey this to the inspector as soon as possible and carry out any review work requested by the inspector as a result. Work to be carried out by officers in consultation with the executive member and deputy executive member for planning and transport.
Thank you, Hilary. Can we take us into the vote, please?
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
As well.
Sorry, I appreciate timing's not great, but what are you doing with regard to the recommendations in the Part 1 report? I thought we were planning on taking everything at the same time.
Sorry, Anthony, I'm not sure what you mean. Is that? Can you? Oh, sorry. Can you explain that for me? Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. The Part 1 report has 3 recommendations within it. You said earlier that you would take those 3 recommendations and the motion at the same time. Hilary's there has obviously only just read out the motion.
Right. Sorry. I thought I separated them out again. Anthony, did I not?
Can I say something, Chair?
Is there a point of order, Ruth?
Yeah, because we've asked for a recorded vote for the motion, and also I think we should take the recommendations one by one.
Okay. So
Chair, that's what I was trying to get a point of order. You need to take 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 separate to the main motion. You took 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 as separate votes. There was no call for a recorded vote on those, so that should be quick and easy. Then you would need to move to a recorded vote, Chair, on the substantive motion.
Well, a point of order on that. I don't think we can take 2.3 before we voted on the motion.
We can, because it says if should be mind that should minders be approved. Should the motion be approved?
Yes. Yes, I agree. So we're all right. Then we're going to go into the vote for. We're going to take them separately: 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. So Hilary, if you can take us through the vote for 2.1, please.
Yes, Chair. I'm just going to make sure all the votes are cleared from the. Yes. Okay. So if members, you would like to vote on 2.1, that the contents of the Part 1 and Part 2 reports be noted. I think that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. And if we can clear the scores and go into 2.2, please.
2.2, that the council's current position on the matters of objectively assessed housing need and housing supply as submitted to the examination in August 2020 and attached as submitted to the examination, and attached as appendixes A and B be noted.
Thank you. Please vote.
If you'd like to vote, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's carried.
Thank you, Hilary. And can you take us into 2.3 then, please, for a vote?
Yes. Okay, 2.3 is that should members be minded to approve the substantive motion, officers are advised of the broad scope and scale of the modifications being sought and the planning justifications for these to forward to the inspector. So if you can vote, please. So everyone voted, and that's carried with 19 for, 11 against, the rest abstain. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go into the vote for the motion itself. Hilary, if I could ask you to read it out once more, just so everybody's clear what it says.
Yes, the motion, which you are going to have a recorded vote on,
Yep,
is that the council notes that the projected The council notes that the projected housing need for North Hertfordshire has reduced as a result of the latest predictions by the Office of National Statistics. The council believes that the proposed allocation of housing sites in the local plan should be reduced to reflect this reduction in projected need and instructs officers to convey this to the inspector as soon as possible and carry out any review work requested by the inspector as a result. Work to be carried out by officers in consultation with the executive member and deputy executive member of planning and transport. Thank you.
if you could all vote, please.
Okay, so we are actually voting. This is a recorded vote, so I will call your surnames, and if you can please respond for, against, or abstain. If you don't mind, I'm only going to call surnames. Albert.
Against.
Alan.
For.
Aspinwall.
Against.
Sorry, was that against?
Against.
Thank you. Claire Billing.
Against.
Thank you. Judy Billing.
Against.
Ruth Brown.
For.
Bryant.
Against.
Clark. Councillor Clark.
For.
Thank you very much. Collins.
For.
Davies.
Abstain.
Deakin Davies.
Against.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Against.
Thank you. Dennis Harburg.
Against.
Derbyshire.
Against.
Green.
Against.
Sorry. Against. Thank you. Harwood.
Against.
Hone.
Against.
Hoskins.
For.
Hewson.
Against.
Hunter.
Abstain.
Jarvis.
For.
Levitt.
Against.
Mantle.
Against.
McNally.
Abstain.
Thank you. Moody.
For.
Morris.
For.
Muir.
Abstain.
Nash.
For.
Nguala.
Against.
North.
For.
Oliver.
Abstain.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Abstain.
Thank you. Prendergast.
For.
Rice.
Against.
Ruggiero Chaka.
Against.
Stania.
For.
Diaz Hanscom.
Against.
Strong.
Abstain.
Bake.
Against.
Tyler,
4.
Tyson.
4.
If you can just give me a couple of seconds just to add up the different. Sorry, did you hear that, Chair, or was I muted at the time when I was trying to tell you the result? I announced that to myself then, I do apologise. So the result was 14 for the motion, 19 against the motion and 6 abstentions. So the motion is lost.
Okay, thank you, Hilary. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and for the public for tuning in to this meeting. I'm going to close the meeting at 21:41. Have a good evening.
Chairman.